for a second.
He's a liability, okay? There are kids in this house.
Come on, Alice, this is insane.
This is too much for me. I didn't sign up for this. All of this.
I agree. I think he needs to leave.
I think you guys need to find somewhere else to stay. While we get our lives back on track.
Wait. Alice.
I'm sorry. Hey, your skin. Some cleansers have clean, retain light moisture. CeraVe cleansers help you maintain their moisture balance with hyaluronic acid plus 3 essential synthetics to help restore the natural barrier. CeraVe cleanser.
Which one of you has been eating all the Cheeto snacks? This little baby can detect trace amounts of Cheeto. What? Did they get a cat? It's a Cheetos thing.
Here's something that you want. Are you ready for the most scrumptious gummy vitamin? Ordinary flavor, something that's deliciously healthy, and it doesn't have to break the bank. Vitafusion gummy vitamins, something worth two.
You the right thing now.
Hunger on you.
But Alice, look at me for a second. God, I've missed you so much. I have no idea how to be alone.
Austin, what are we doing?
Our relationship don't get blurry, you know that.
I know it is. And once and for all, I think we need to clear it up.
I
I want a divorce.
I'm not following.
I want a divorce. Like I legally don't want to be married.
No, I won't divorce me. I thought we weren't ready to make such a... You're ready.
I am. You're right.
Right. Right. That's why the idiot who was dealt a winning hand and still managed to lose.
I think maybe it's all worked out the way it was supposed to.
I guess we both know that if I'd seen a sliver of hope, I would have tried to weasel my way back in.
I hope he's here.
He has to be. Justin is the only other person he knows in LA.
Sure.
Can we come in one on time?
I got the meeting. I'm not moving. What happened to your face? I beat the crap out of Boston.
Bullshit, Ernest.
Did Alice see you do it? Yeah. She tried to kick this out. Seriously?
Yeah.
And what about Austin? You stayed?
Yeah.
You guys hungry? Just some leftover gnome.
Harry, we came here to apologize. Neither of us should have hidden anything from you.
Is that a note in the note? Awesome. What's that one? It's just sushi.
We were just afraid that you were going to think that we were doubting you or losing faith in the movie.
That's exactly what I think.
We're not paying you. My other job is basically done, and if Teddy lands another part, then we will work around it.
He's right. We're doing this. All right, we're making this happen.
There you are. Is Daddy? Yeah, Daddy is fine. He just has a little bruise. He's asleep now, so he's gonna be okay. I'm really sorry that you guys have to see that. Is he okay? What was that? He's coming with an away, which is great. But he's not coming with us. What about the guys? Did they leave? Mm-hmm. Pretty good? I think so. Does that mean we won't ever see them again? I mean, George is going to come to my place. Yeah, I know George, honey, and trust me, he won't be there. I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking forward to it just being the three of us again. Actually, I think that sounds good. I could use some peace and quiet.
Hi.
Hi,
Come in.
is it okay?
Yeah, come on.
I didn't call.
Yeah, that's good. We're still in the moving in phase.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Yeah.
This place is great.
Uh-huh. Oh, man.
Are the guys here?
No, they just went out for a bit. They'll be back. But this should be me showing up at your door. But I don't know, with Boston there.
Oh, he's gone.
He went back to New York.
No, he's here in LA, just not with me. We are officially done. So,
Wow. Wow. Well, A+ decision.
yeah.
Yeah. Alice, I should have said this before, in a real way at least, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry for standing you up that night, and I think like I've relived it like 1,000 times in my head, and I can't wrap my mind around what kind of a person would do that to you. Let alone it was me. It was one of the top 5 worst decisions I've ever made, and I have made some pretty questionable decisions in my time. But bottom line, you deserve much better than me. I don't mean that like most guys mean it, which is that they don't mean it at all. I actually do. I really do.
You know, before I met you, I was probably more alone and terrified than I'd ever been in my entire life. And through that crazy turn of events, you made that fade away. And I'll always be. And since you guys have gone, I've been really trying to get my life in order. But it made me realize I just really miss you guys.
Oh my God, we miss you so much. We talk about it all the
So
time.
glad you heard me say that. Surprise!
Hey!
You got flowers?
Yeah, we always look so good at your house, and we get some from ours.
Thank you. So we're here. How's it is? We've been texting a bit.
Yeah, she told me.
She's so hyped up for tomorrow.
Did she tell you she started meditating?
Yeah, I love that.
Although maybe there's a debate. Do you have a base? Some things about you as a house art right now.
My guys, listen, before we go in there, whatever happens, we're still gonna make a great movie together. Okay? Not something you watch on your smartphone and forget about what's even over. It's got brains, got the heart, got the nerve. Yeah. All right. It's gonna be good. Yeah, I mean, you're proud of me. Hey. We're here. Sure, yeah, no problem. Let's run a bit late. All right. Showtime.
Hey. Hi, baby. Tell me your sleepover dining.
It was so fun. You had pancakes for dinner.
Okay, fellas, here's the thing. I love your script. I totally get what you're going for. But maybe we could make it even bigger.
Okay, sure, how so?
Maybe, I don't know, it could be sexier. You know, it's more excitement, more action. Maybe the Sam character has to assemble a group of guys from various locations, and then they have to pull off a big heist.
So basically, Ocean's 11.
Yes, love it. Great. Young Oceans, exactly.
Sam isn't really big time like that. He's just doing it to get by.
I know, I thought that's why we could, I didn't know we get somebody really great to play Sam. I bet kid from Hunger Games. Well,
Actually, we got Teddy attached. I told you about that.
Oh.
It's fantastic.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we definitely find something for your club. Look, Justin, I trust you. You know that. And I think that you guys are super talented. My only concern is that it's too small, or I don't know, cute, is it the right word?
We gotta run.
Hey, wait.
We appreciate you taking the time. We really, really do. But truthfully, we have an 11-year-old's play to attend. So if your answer is no, which it seems to be, since you've missed pretty much every lovely detail, well, this isn't really gonna make much of a difference, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I think you're making a mistake. Teddy is one of the most talented actors of our generation. And George, he understands people, the way we think, and why we do the unexplainable. Film is the great love of our lives. And if you take a chance on us, there's like an 80% chance that we will not let you down. Now, Warren, quick question. You ever have a car downstairs?
You're amazing. Amazing.
Sure you're okay with this? Yes, there will be another battle. Don't worry.
Sorry. The doors are closed. What do you want? Once the show begins, no one is admitted. Those are the rules.
You're joking, right? It's a different plane on Hamilton.
They under strict orders to close the doors at 6, and it is now 6:15. So
I actually need to get backstage. There's a very It will be totally.
You know what? I don't know about. Sorry, bud.
Action star.
And now, 3+3 by Isabel Blue.
Vicki Walters, Columbus, Ohio.
Hello, it's Tanya. Can y'all see me? Can you turn that down?
Hey, family.
Can y'all see me?
Hey,
No,
Hi, you can see me?
no.
no.
No?
George, thank God. George? What?
Terry, how will I be able to get this recording?
Terry's on mute. Hey, Rudy.
What began as a day like any other ended as anything but. There must have been something.
Hi, I can't come to the phone right now. Please leave your name and number.
Isn't much of a city at all.
Hey, Alona. You're on mute right now.
Hey, Dennis. George and Betty.
Oh, hey, hi, George, Betty.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well.
Happy belated Thanksgiving.
Okay, I got it all.
All right. Hey, that was just your aunt and uncle just talking, George and Betty.
Hey, how you doing, family?
Hello.
Hey, Arthur.
Hey, Artie.
Let's identify yourself so we can know who's there.
Alana.
Alana.
Dawn.
Denise.
Artie.
Vicki.
Tranisha.
Go ahead, do it again, Trishina.
Tranisha.
Tranisha. Yeah, sorry. Dennis. Tony, you're mute.
Dennis. Hey, Terry. How you all doing? Tony Walker.
Hey.
Hey everybody, it's Terry. I'm just getting myself set up here, getting the Facebook thing all lined up. And as I said, we could probably start about 10 minutes after, just to give everybody a chance who might have tech issues to get on. But I see you're talking amongst yourselves. So keep talking amongst yourselves. Keep chatting. Good to see y'all.
Well, Terry, one thing is good that a lot of us are familiar with each other, but there's quite a few that aren't. So that helps out a whole lot, that if we get together and communicate with each other, We've been torn apart for various reasons, and I just think it's great that we can come together. The one quick story I got to tell is Alana lived only a block away from me. I didn't know her at all. I mean, less than a block.
Yep.
Wow.
I couldn't believe that, And then Terry, you're about a mile away from me with Pam and everybody else, and it's just wow. I just wish those connections would have been made earlier because we were so close together.
Well, the nice thing is that the generations behind us have the benefit of all the work that you've done, Dennis, and pulling stuff together, and work that Alana's mom did, because that's the basis of a lot of the stuff that we have. And so they keep it together, and here we are, even with COVID, we're actually communicating with one another, and having a digital reunion.
Yes, yes, because sometimes we just can't get together based on our where we are. So, but it's good that we can just get together this way. So we may have to do more of it.
Like you said, they needed the link. Wayne needs the link.
Mary. I don't know. No, probably not.
All right. If you're joining the call, please, you can go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself, please.
Hi. Hello.
Well, it's nice for all of you to say hi or whatever, but hi and whatever does not give me a name. This is Betty Franklin, and Terry is our son. My husband is George, who's sitting next to me. So when we say our names, is that Alana?
Yeah,
well,
that's me.
I didn't recognize your girlfriend.
What you mean you didn't recognize me?
I don't know. You looking so much like Aunt Hazel, as you always did, that I just did not recognize you, Alana. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
But anyway, yes. Betty and George, speak for
Yes,
yourself.
I'm George. Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, and go on from there.
My name is Art Broomfield. I'm Dorothy Sutton's son.
And I'm Denise Broomfield, and I'm Artie's sister.
Okay.
And my sister Carmen should be coming on.
Carmen, you're muted, so you got to unmute yourself, Carmen.
She's probably got to get Denise to help her there.
My name is Kimberly Penner Nichols, daughter of Dorian Penner. And I can, and I cannot show myself at this time.
Ooh.
Unmute. There you go.
Okay, here I am. Well, how do I get this off here, Denise? I'm Carmen Tubbs, and I am the sister of Artie, and Denise Broomfield.
That's not you.
Oh,
hi.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. And who am I?
Can I ask something else?
Sure.
Yeah.
To say where you are located. George and I are in Olympia Fields, which is about 30 miles from Chicago, south of Chicago. So
3 miles from 3 miles from Venice.
Oh.
Okay. Well, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. Carmen Tubbs.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah.
And me and Artie are in Columbus.
Oh, all right. Yes.
That's Columbus, Ohio?
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Rudy Sutton here from Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, Rudy.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Ruth. How you doing?
Doing good. How about you?
I'm doing fine.
I see that ice cream cone in your hand.
Yeah, I'm sitting here getting ready with y'all now.
I'm Dawn Penner, and I'm from Indianapolis, but I live in Stone Mountain, Georgia.
Okay.
I'm Dorian's daughter.
Yep, I see the face.
I'm gonna say, gosh, this is so great to see you guys, to see family. This is especially since we didn't get a chance to go home for Thanksgiving.
This is a nice tool, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Very good.
I'm Alana Monaghan Arnold. I am Georgia Evelyn
Well, I'm
Crimp.
Vicky.
Georgia Evelyn Crimp's daughter, Hazel and George Grimm's granddaughter, and I'm in Chicago.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's check. Let's check.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, Vic.
Hey. Well, I'm Vicky Sutton Walters. Rudy Sutton is my brother. Floyd Sutton is my father, Columbus, Ohio.
Very good.
I like your glasses, Vic.
I gotta see.
Right.
Alana,
Is that Paul Parnell over there?
yeah.
Paul
Hello,
Parnell.
yes. This is Paul Purnell.
Yes.
My mother was Carnell Sumner Purnell. My father, Cecil Purnell. My brother is Cecil Purnell Jr. I'm originally from Chicago, and I'm now in Silver Spring, Maryland. So nice to see everybody.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Could I ask Alana to make a mention of your mother, Georgia?
Yeah.
I know you recognize the fact that you were the daughter of Georgia, but I think it would be good to expound upon the fact that Georgia initiated or attempted to initiate family reunions to the extent where she could do as Terry is attempting to do at this time, and that was connect the roots.
Hey, Betty, you sound like you did it pretty good. Yes.
Thank you.
My mother started basically the grassroots family reunion in Carbondale in her backyard, which was my grandparents' home prior to that in the early 80s. And of course, because she did it, I was forced and committed to do it also. So in Chicago for years, I was on the Chicago family reunion committee with Betty and George and a lot of our other cousins.
Very good. That's good.
We're all the beneficiaries of that. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that when we get into it. So, do we think there are people out there who are still trying to get on? We're all the beneficiaries of that. Because I'm probably going to.
Well, there was a text. I text from Tanya and said she was on her way home, so she should be getting on shortly.
Tanya is on.
Tanya's on? Okay.
All right, so I'm going to try to change this and mute everybody. I think I can do it.
I was going to say hi really quickly.
Oh, yes.
This is
hi.
Daryl and Gerard. Hello, this
Hey.
is Daryl and Gerard Caldwell. We live
What
in
y'all doing?
Springfield, Illinois. I am Louise Perkins' granddaughter.
Okay.
Gerald's daughter.
Oh, it's nice seeing you again. I've seen you down in Metropolis.
Yes, very good to see you all. We're in Springfield Broomfield, Illinois.
I don't
Terry,
think
thanks
I've
for
seen
putting
you
this
since
together.
Aunt Viola's, either Aunt Viola's funeral or from her 100th anniversary celebration. One of
That's
those.
right. That's right. Yep.
And
So
I
good.
see Daryl is there.
Was anybody else?
Yes, Daryl is here.
I'm in the family.
He said he's in the family.
That's about
Can anyone hear me?
Well, I'm here
This is
also.
King.
I am Louise Perkins' granddaughter. My name is Ivy Beverly. Initially, before I got married, it was Ivy Perkins, and my grandson here, Eden. And we're in San Jose, California.
Okay.
We're initially, quite naturally, I was born in Champaign and lived in Chicago for 17 years, then went to Oklahoma, where I graduated from HBCU, Langston University. I believe Terry and I actually went to Whitney Young together. He's several years older than me, but I'm class of 87.
Oh yeah, I was class of 80. I'm the old guy. I didn't realize you were a fellow
So
Dolphin.
I was in the academic center. So I think,
Right. So you're another Dolphin.
Yes.
I knew it felt like we had more connections than just the family connection, and now I know why.
Right.
Look, I'm getting all this feedback. I guess we should mute unless we're speaking.
So you're another Dolphin.
I'm Karen from Iowa.
Who's
And
from
my
Iowa?
maiden name is Perkins. Yeah, my maiden name is Perkins.
Look, I'm getting all this feedback. I guess we should mute unless we're speaking.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm your Iowa family.
Well, welcome.
You know, we have people in Iowa, but okay.
We were my Perkins relatives lived next door down the street from the Crims. We know the Crims. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm Tanya Sutton Edwards. I am Floyd Sutton's youngest daughter, and my brother Rudy Sutton and Vicki Walters are on the call today.
Tanya, I can't see you.
You can't see me?
No.
I don't know why.
Okay, well, maybe you'll come up.
It still
Can
shows
anyone hear
you're
me?
connecting.
Yeah, we hear you.
But
Yeah, we hear you. It says you're connecting, so.
And I also recently found out that myself, my mother, and my nephew and my brother are DNA matches to Sylvester Sutton, which we didn't know.
Okay.
That's our Uncle Butch.
Yeah.
It's our Uncle Butch.
Yeah.
Before we get started, I'd like to introduce my daughter, Ijaya. She's my oldest daughter. Yes, she's 29, and we live here together in San Jose. She graduated from San Jose State University.
Very good.
All right.
So we're glad to be here and meet everybody, and happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, we're
Glad
happy
you're
to
here.
meet you too. I have a brother in San Jose. He was just appointed vice president of the Chamber of Commerce in San Jose.
Oh.
He's a Perkins, Glenn Perkins.
Really? Because
Yeah.
we'll have to talk more. There's the church I go to, they had a meeting with the member of the Chamber of Commerce and the African Cultural Center. And yeah, we'll have to talk more. Who said that?
That's
Karen. I'm Karen, yeah.
Okay, Karen.
And
I'm gonna have to talk to
I'm
you.
waving.
And my family is also in San Jose, or my part of the branch. I don't know who we're related to. We can go all the way back, but Jordans and yeah. So we have some Johnsons in San Jose right now.
Tanisha, okay, Tanisha, all right.
So anybody else need to introduce themselves before we get started? I know it's late on the East Coast, so I don't want people to be up too late. Anybody else? And there's probably people on Facebook too, type in, say, hey, I don't think I'm actually monitoring that. Anybody else need to introduce themselves before we get started? I know it's late on the East Coast, so I don't want people to be up too late. So I'm going to try to mute everybody. There's probably people on Facebook too, type in, say, hey, I don't think I'm actually monitoring that. Anybody else need to introduce themselves before we get started?
Sometimes when you have two devices on at once, that
Yeah,
gets
we're
you
getting the feedback. So I'm gonna if anybody can't, everybody can. If you can unmute yourself also, that might help too.
Yes.
If you can mute yourself, that'd be great. I'm trying to figure out how to do that on my own, but I don't know how.
So should we mute ourselves when someone else is talking?
You should be able to mute yourself at any time. You can either go to the little, if you hover over the right corner of your image and click on it, or if you get onto the bottom left, there should be a button that says mute, and if you click on that, that should be able to mute yourself at any time. You can either go to the little, if you hover over the
Okay.
right corner of your image and click on it, or if you get onto the bottom left, there should be a button that says mute, and if you click on that, that should be mute. I'm still hearing me coming through somebody's Facebook, I think. Maybe it's mine. Okay, here we are. Thank you all so much for being here. This means so much to me that you were willing to give me a little time to tell the story that I've been telling that is part of our family's legacy. And I've been telling it around the country, and I realized that I haven't really shared it with us. And if I'm going to share it, I ought to share it with all of us. So thank you for giving me a chance to fulfill my mission. I think of this as my personal mission in life is to try to bend the arc of history towards justice by sharing this story of our family. And so this is going to be really relevant to everybody here who's on the line, whether you're in the family or not. And I just welcome you here. So this is the story of our family, of our ancestors. And this is the story about how my great-great-great-great-grandfather, John Sutton, was a white farmer in Florida. He owned my great-great-great-great-grandmother, Lucy Sutton, who you all are related to too. And in 1846, as John Sutton was about to die, he did a will. And in that will, he provided that he owned certain property, to wit, a mulatto slave named Lucy, aged about 45, and her 8 children, Easter, Maria, Mahala, all the way down to the youngest boy, David. And Easter had 6 children of her own, all the way down to little toddler Mahala, who was 14 months old in 1846 when the family escaped from slavery. And this is the story of how I have been fortunate enough to unpack and discover our ancestor story, and how I get a chance to share it with you guys and with people around the country. This story has become so much a part of my life. It's hard to say exactly where I should start, because I realize it goes back to when I was a little kid, even before I knew that this story existed, because I think it was in my DNA. But I'd like to start with Aunt Viola. Aunt Viola was the matriarch of our little branch of the family. And let me share my screen with you. So there you go. This is what I call the last will of Lucy Sutton, an antebellum interracial, really it's a story of love, because I don't know if it's love between John and Lucy, or if it's just the story of one woman making sure that her family would make it to freedom. But as I said, this story from my perspective always begins with Aunt Viola. Viola Crim Walker. She was born on February 17th, 1914. And in 2014, she was about to turn 100. And we were going to have a family reunion to celebrate her life. And people were putting this together. Cousin Cherie was working on it. And I think my mom worked some on it. And the idea was that we were going to gather in St. Louis and have a little mini reunion. And then the next day we were going to surprise Aunt Viola at her church. We were going to sneak in through the back. And as I was preparing to go for this reunion, I wanted to do something special to commemorate her. And for those who don't know her story and how she's connected, Aunt Viola is my mother's aunt. Here's a picture from a family reunion. Aunt Viola is over here on the right. My grandmother, Leora Krim, is over here on the left, and that's my grandfather behind her, Theodore Long. And this is, we have Alonzo and Florence Krim, who were my great grandmother and great grandfather. And again, they had, everybody will recognize various people in here, and I can't remember all the names right now, but Aunt Viola here, who'd been born in 1914, was kind of a matriarch of our family. She was the youngest of her age, and she was the last to survive, and she was the one who always kept track of everybody's birthdays. I know she would call my mom every Tuesday, and that was the standard day when they would check in with each other. She would send gifts at holiday time when we were kids growing up, and there were stories about the way that she had grown up and how when she was in college, she walked 4 miles each way to Southern Illinois University. So you Salukis out there can toast her for that. And she married Harold Walker, who was a Tuskegee Airman. And the story is, as they tell it, that she actually traveled with him to Tuskegee to teach the children of other Tuskegee Airmen before they shipped off to the war. She taught at Crispus Attucks Elementary School, which is also where she'd gone. And she and her husband both taught in the Sunday school at church. And she was just a meaningful, significant person in all our lives. And I wanted to do something special that would say, we recognize you and your value, and we should find ways to stay connected. And I knew that I remembered something from a family reunion that I'd attended way back in 2011. And in 2011, I'd gone to a family reunion, or 2001, I said 2011, 2001, we'd gone to a family reunion that was in Chicago. And it was the Krim, Singleton, Sumner, Alsop family reunion. We would get together. I know my mom was involved in planning that. I see you down there peering down at that. And I remembered in 2014 that, 13 years before, I'd gone to this family reunion and I had seen something in that set of family reunion materials. And it was an excerpt from a will. And it's typed up in cursive font. And those of you who are old enough to remember typewriters may be old enough to also remember cursive font and may understand the idea that we would try to type something in a cursive font if we tried to replicate the idea of something that had been handwritten. So somebody, and I think it was probably Alana's mom, Georgia, who was doing all that family reunion work that she was saying, setting things up back in the 1980s, had gone to the county recorder's office down in Polk County, where the family lived or had lived, and had dug around in the records and had somehow managed to come across this document, which was this excerpt from John Sutton's will. And it said, "Be it remembered that whereas by the last will and testament of John Sutton, deceased, a native of North Carolina," and it went on to explain that the original of the will was filed in Duval County, Florida, which is where John had lived with Lucy and her children. And a copy was also recorded in Ware County, Georgia, which is where John had been from. And then there was this final copy that was recorded in Polk County, Illinois, which actually said that William Adams, who was the executor of the estate, had accomplished his job and brought the whole family to Southern Illinois. And by doing so, he was able to record the will from John Sutton that provided that after his death, all of his property was to be sold, his 400 cows and everything else that he described in his will. And they were all to be sold to help finance the family's trip from Jacksonville to Ohio or Illinois or Indiana or some other free state where they could enjoy their freedom. So I had remembered that this little bit of papers were in that 2001 family reunion materials in 2014. And I was thinking, I would love to be able to actually find the will, to actually put my hands on the original document, because I know where it is. And I should also mention that by profession, I'm a trust and estates litigator, which means I do will contests and family disputes in court, will contests. So when people are fighting over who's to get what from an estate, and I didn't know whether there was anything like that in our family. All I knew was I'm a trust and estates litigator and I know how to find documents. And I happen to be a fellow in the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel, which was a national organization of trust and estates lawyers from coast to coast. And in fact, at the time, I was the only African-American fellow in the college. And not that that's a good thing, because we should have had more then and we need more now, but we're working on it. And the point of it was that being a member or a fellow in that college meant that I had access to a directory of lawyers who do trust and estates work from across the country. And the idea is that we should be able to open up that directory and call up any lawyer in another jurisdiction and say, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you help me out here? And I thought, I should be able to try and track down this will, maybe in time for Aunt Viola's birthday. So I opened my directory and I looked up two lawyers and they seemed to be about the same age that I was. And I left messages for both of them. And the first one called me back and her name was Ann Busby Walt. And she left me a message and she said, I understand what you're looking for, but there was a fire in Jacksonville in 1901, the Great Fire of Jacksonville that basically destroyed the entire city. So it's probably not likely that you're going to find a document from 1846 that set your ancestors free. So I was disappointed, needless to say, but not long after, I got a phone call, a voicemail at least, from another office in Florida. This is from a paralegal. Her name was Ann also, Ann Tatum, and she was a paralegal for a lawyer. And she left me a message. And she said, I got a message from the lawyer that I work for, and he asked me if I could take a look and see if I could help you out. And I called her up and I explained to her what I was trying to do, which was to find this document for Aunt Viola's 100th birthday. And I just wondered if maybe she could help me find it. I said, I know about the fire in 1901, so I'm not probably going to be able to find it, but it would be great if I could. And she said, yeah, there was the fire, but let me see what I can do. So the end of that day, she sent me an email that said, we found a John Sutton file. I don't know if it's the right one, but we should have it by Friday. Meanwhile, I sent her information about Aunt Viola and what her life had been like, or what her life was like. And, you know, this wonderful, vibrant woman at 100 years old. And so I think this paralegal got into it too, and she wanted to see what she could do to help me. And that Friday morning, I went into the office. And again, this is about a week before we're going back for great Aunt Viola's 100th birthday. And I go in, there's an email. And it says, we found it. It's the right one. We found the John Sutton file. And she said, you know, well, what do you want me to do? And I called her up and she said, what do you want me to do? I said, take a picture. So she sent the attorney service that was there to take a picture. And all of a sudden, across 170 years and across the internet comes this image of this brown faded paper and this red wax seal, you know, from the days before they had lick 'em stick 'em envelopes when you had to fold over a piece of paper and seal it. And on the other side of that were some notations, some markings that were indicated that this was the will of John Sutton and that it had been prepared by a lawyer named Gregory Yale on January 24th, 1846, and that he was depositing it with the clerk of the court on January 26th of 1846. And also what came through was this 2-page handwritten document, and all written out, explaining that John was, when he died, he wanted all of his property sold to finance the travel of his slaves, Lucy and all 8 of her children and 6 of her grandchildren, to a free state. And at the end of it, it was marked with kind of an X, kind of a mark. It wasn't signed by John. Maybe he'd been too sick to sign, or maybe he couldn't sign, I don't know. But suddenly I had this image from this document that was our family's freedom papers. So I took these images and we went to that family reunion and we shared and enjoyed a good time with one another. And one of the things we talked about when we were having the reunion discussion was whether we should be expanding the name of the family reunion group. Because as I said, we'd called ourselves the Crim, Singleton, Sumner, Alsop family reunion group. And I thought maybe we should add Sutton. Now we know that Lucy was there and she seemed to have been a Sutton. And one of my cousins said, I don't know, do we really want to name ourselves after the slave master, somebody who owned us, someone who clearly raped our ancestors to bring us here? And I had to think about that because we know that under a system of slavery, no child born of that union is a child of consent, no matter what. If you're enslaved, you cannot say yes. There is no consent for a slave. And so we understand that nature, complex as it is, of men and women in a situation that allows a crazy thing like slavery to exist. But I said, we know that she later used the name Sutton, and I like to think, since he made sure that they got free, that at least he had some kind of kindness or something that led him to make sure that the family would make it to freedom. And besides that, I want to proclaim the strength and the heroism of Lucy, because I believe that somehow she made sure that John Sutton did that will before he passed away. So I wanted to invest her with that agency. And so we had this nice chat about what this all means and what slavery could mean, and trying to envision the world in a way that we really can't put our heads around because we've never lived it. As horrible as some things are in our society, we've never lived through real slavery. So I kept thinking about that will, and I kept thinking about that relationship, if you could call it that, between John and Lucy, and what it was that made sure that the family would make it to freedom in the end. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I want to share this with other people. I want to think about it. I want to talk about it. I want to talk it out. And so I ended up spending some time writing an article. And before I mention that, I just want to say, think about the time frame for all of this. John Sutton was born in 1770, 6 years before the Declaration of Independence was signed. So think about that connection and how John fits in the time frame of American history, and how John is connected to Lucy and their children, and how those children are connected to us, and how we're all connected to this history. So I wrote an article, and I called it Tracing One Family's Path to Freedom Through Love. Whether there's really love or not, who knows? But again, we made sure, or John made sure, that the family made their way to freedom. And I published that article in a magazine called Probate and Property Magazine that Trust and Estates lawyers read. And a few weeks after I published that article, I got an email from a professor at Suffolk University in Massachusetts. And her name was Bernie Jones, and she sent me a message that said she'd written a book called Fathers of Conscience, Mixed Race Inheritance in the Antebellum South. And in that book, she had followed situations where there were white men who were single or who were widowed, who had left gifts, either of emancipation, setting people free, or who had left gifts of property to Black people, or had emancipated enslaved people. And many times those men would die. Well, they would always die. Everybody's going to die at some point. But after they would die, the family members would come out, their white family, and they might say, well, we don't think he really wanted to set those people free. We really think he wanted to have them stay with us. And he wasn't feeling so well. And I don't really believe that that will is valid. So they would challenge the wills in court, which is exactly what I do for a living. So I had some sense of how this all plays out. And a lot of the cases, what would happen is the judge might say at the trial level, well, yes, this is clearly what the decedent intended. He said he wanted to emancipate these enslaved people. And so I have to give effect to that, and they should be freed. But sometimes those cases would go up to the Court of Appeal, and the courts of appeal would say something like, well, yes, this is what he appeared to want to do. But on the other hand, this is the state of Mississippi, and in Mississippi, we don't allow any more free Negroes, so we're not going to give effect to that will, so those people remain enslaved, and they go to the decedent's family. I was fascinated, and I know I'm a trust and estates geek because this is my life and my living, and so nobody else could be as fascinated about this as I was, but I thought, this is amazing, just the idea of really trying to understand this concept of people as property and how dehumanizing and demoralizing that is, and how nonetheless it was this accepted way of dealing with things. And I thought, how could people hear this and understand it and wrap their heads around history? And I thought, I got to tell this story. How can I share this story? I want to tell this story. And so I thought I should write a novel. I should write a novel and tell the story to everybody, and people can hear it and kind of relate to these experiences in some way, whether they feel empathy or compassion. And if you see it and you hear it, then you're going to feel compelled to try to do something to change the world and make it better. Because if you see this, you think, maybe there's things going on right now that are equally unjust and just as much oppression, and you start to see it and you want to make change yourself. So I wanted to write this novel, and I wanted to have a scene, and I could imagine it, where at the end, where Lucy gets to say, yes, John Sutton owned me, but I owned him just the same. And I started outlining this thing, and I had made some notes of it, and I should stop for a moment and say, y'all know we're a Christian family. And we had, let's see, a piano, a choir director, a choir pianist, a choir organist. We had a president of a congregation. We had a drummer in church. We had the president of the youth group. We had an AME minister. And that was just in our family of four. I see mom and dad there, but you all know that this is our family. And even the beginning of the will says, in the name of God, amen. And Aunt Viola was the mother of her church. And so we have deep, strong connections to our Christian heritage. And that's what I grew up in. And as much as that's true, I have to say that as I was thinking about this will process, I have to say that I was at that time dating somebody named Jeffrey Moline, who is now my husband. We got married a couple of years ago, and he was a practicing Buddhist. He'd been practicing Buddhism for 24 years or something before we met. And part of his practice means that he chants in the morning and the evening this Buddhist chant, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which means dedication to the mystic law of cause and effect. That means if you do something good comes back to you. You do something bad comes back to you. It's about all those things like do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the same golden rules that apply to most religions. And I wasn't somebody who chanted with him because it was a little strange to me. But every once in a while I would do it with him just because I think it was a powerful way for us to connect. And one day he was chanting what they call morning gongyo, which is 2 parts of this Lotus Sutra. And there's a part of it towards the end where there's a prayer, and you pray for your ancestors back 7+ generations for enlightenment from them. And at the same time, you're praying for the happiness of your descendants 7 generations into the future. And on this particular day, when I happened to chant with Jeffrey, I don't know what happened while we were chanting for the ancestors, but I know that John and Lucy were here with me. It was in this room where I'm sitting right now, a couple of feet from where I am, in fact. And all I knew was that they were there with me. And I knew it like I know that in wintertime when Jeffrey goes to bed and I go to bed, if it's cold, he tends to run hot and I run cold. So I put my cold hands on him and it warms him, it cools him down and warms my hands. And I knew it like I know that when my daughters gave me a pair of rainbow cufflinks a few years ago for Father's Day, that it was their way of saying to me that they love the dad that I am, a gay man, as much as they love the straight dad that I've tried so hard to be for them. But that's how much I knew that John and Lucy were with me. Maybe they were coming through my DNA. I don't know, but they were there and they were telling me that there was more to this story and I needed to keep pursuing it. And in the days that followed, I would be finding myself waking up in the middle of the night, 4:44 in the morning and tossing and turning. And Jeffrey said, "What's the matter with you?" And I said, "I don't know. I feel like John and Lucy are here and they're telling me something." And I kept working on the outline and I thought, who can I make be the villain of this story? I got to find somebody who's a villain because the way I'm outlining this, John's going to die, Lucy's going to be ready to go. And just like in those stories from Fathers of Conscience, I've got to find somebody who is a white relative of John who wants to keep the family enslaved. And I decided, how about John's got a brother? Let's make up a brother. I don't know if there's a brother or not, but let's make up a brother and let's come up with a good old timey name. And so I called him Eustace. Eustace Sutton seemed like a good old timey name. So I outlined this novel. And I kept thinking about it. And by happenstance or by the fates or by fortune or God or the universe, a few months later, I was going to be in Florida for a conference. And I told Jeffrey, as long as we're going to be in Florida for the ACTEC conference, again, it's that same organization that I'm a fellow in that allowed me to get access to the document in the first place. I said, as long as we're going to be in Florida for the conference, why don't we go see the will? Jeffrey's a good sport. Jeffrey said, yeah, let's do that. Now, here's the map of Florida. And I'm smart in many ways, but I guess my geography is not so good because what I didn't realize was that when we were at a conference down here at a place called Marco Island, and the will was in Jacksonville, which is in Duval County, which is way up here in the northeast corner. And it's probably pretty hard to do a straight line from any two places in Florida without getting further apart, maybe from there to there. But otherwise, we knew this was going to be a long ride. And if I'd been smart about it, I would have gotten a plane ticket and we could have flown, but I wasn't, or at least I hadn't planned ahead. So we were going to be driving and we knew it was going to be a 5.5-hour drive each way. And I said, as long as we're going to be driving 5.5 hours, let's try and do something to make this special, to make this a memorable moment and to recognize the significance of this drive where we're going to go and see the Freedom Papers. And that morning, as I was in the shower preparing for this drive, I was asking myself, what's it going to be like when I see that will? When I hold it in my hands, when I put my finger on that X that my great, 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 great grandfather made that set us all free. And I wondered if I would be emotional, if I would be overwhelmed, or if I would find it funny that that could happen and I could be here today experiencing this connection across the generations. And as I stood there under the shower, I kept visualizing a scene from the movie Selma. And I don't know if you've seen the movie, but I'll describe for you this one little brief scene. This scene involved, it was at a time when Malcolm X was coming to the South because Martin Luther King was in jail at the time. And the two movements were considering how they could ally together because Malcolm X had just left the Nation of Islam. And they were thinking, well, maybe we can show white people that if you don't follow the peaceful path of Martin Luther King, that the alternative is something that requires action that's by any means necessary. And so Malcolm X was coming to the South and he was going to meet with Coretta Scott King, who was, of course, Dr. King's wife, and try and talk to her. And Coretta was a little anxious about it because it wasn't something that she would normally have done. They usually tried to keep her back away from the front lines of a lot of the fights and struggles and conflicts. But her husband was in jail and she was trying to get some suggestions or tips from somebody who had some experience. And so she was talking to Amelia Boynton Robinson. Now, Mrs. Robinson had been very active in the civil rights movement for a long time. She'd been beaten, arrested, and in fact, you might have even heard about her son, Bruce Boynton, who passed away this week at the age of 83. He was the one who, coming back from law school at Howard, had stopped at a restaurant in Richmond, Virginia. And when he went in, they saw that the black side was nasty and wet and the white side was clean. And when he sat down on the white side and the waitress came over and tried to take his order, and he said he wanted a cheeseburger, and she went away, and the manager came back and said, "I'm sorry, we can't serve you here." He said, "Well, I want my cheeseburger, you have to serve me." And he knew what was going to happen he was going to have to be arrested. And in fact, he was arrested. And the next year was when the Freedom Ride started. So that was Amelia Boynton Robinson's son, was somebody who had been an activist person as well. And so we know that Amelia Boynton Robinson knew what to do. And she was trying to comfort Coretta, and she took her, and these two elegant Southern ladies, arm in arms in their tweed suit dresses. And she says, "Do you want me to tell you what I think about at times like this that gives me comfort?" She said, "We are descended from people who gave civilization to the world. People who crossed vast oceans in the hulls of slave ships. People who overcame terrors and tortures unimaginable. People who create and innovate and thrive and love. And their blood runs through you. It's pumping your heart right now. You are already prepared." And that's what I was thinking as the water was rushing down on me, as I was imagining what would happen when I put my finger on that X that set us free. And when I came out of the shower, Jeffrey was chanting, and we went out and we got in the car, we turned on the radio, and it was NPR radio, and they were making the announcement about the Justice Department's review of the fact that the grand jury hadn't done anything with the killers of Michael Brown, the cops in Ferguson, Missouri. And we'd also decided that since we were going to be doing this long drive, that we should make it meaningful in another way. And around this time, we were familiar with the fact that the Equal Justice Initiative, which is the civil rights and social justice organization run by Bryan Stevenson. And some of you may have heard of Bryan Stevenson if you saw the movie Just Mercy with Michael B. Jordan and Jamie Foxx. Well, that movie is all about that guy, Bryan Stevenson, who was still is a pioneer in civil rights and social justice. And they were trying to create a memorial to Black people and to the history of racism and segregation. And what they had done was they had documented some 4,000 lynchings that had taken place in the South between the end of the Civil War and the Civil Rights era. And they had collected information about each one of these lynchings and the names of the people and where they took place. And they were going to gather some soil from each one of those locations and bring them back to this memorial, and the family members could connect with it and try to understand and appreciate how damaging those lynchings were for all of us. And so we had access to the internet, the magic of the wonders of what we live in this society today. And so as we drove from the south of Florida to the north of Florida, we were going to count the numbers of lynchings that took place in each one of the states, each one of the counties that we passed through. So we set on our ride, our 5.5 hour drive, and 5.5 hours later, we arrived in Jacksonville, 125 lynchings later. Here's the receipt from Bryan Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative for the token donation we made of $1 for each one of the lynchings that we were able to count. And each one represented another situation of an act of terrorism where it wasn't just the one person dead, but it was a whole family. It was a whole community that was affected. And in the end, it was all Black people, because that's what it was intended to do. It was an exercise in terrorism to cause all of us to feel fear. So if somebody came back from World War I and had the nerve to have a car, that wasn't right with the white neighbors. And so they decided to take it away and take your life along with it. So reflecting on lynchings, we made our donation of $125 to the Equal Justice Initiative. And finally, after 5.5 hours, we arrived at the courthouse in Jacksonville, 2 gay guys in our jaunty fedoras.
Well, here we are outside the Duval County Courthouse, where I'm expecting that I'll actually be able to see and inspect and touch my great-great-great-great-grandfather John Sutton's will from 1846. This is a little emotional because I've been looking for this for a while, and it's been in the family or known about for a long time. So, especially as a trust and estates lawyer, gets me kind of worked up. So here we go.
So I know those of you who are watching on Facebook probably couldn't see the video, but that was just a video of me just outside the courthouse. I asked Jeffrey to bring along the video camera because we thought this might be an important moment. We went over to the entrance to the courthouse and tried to make our way through the security. And at first, it seemed like there was something strange going on because there were some people who looked at us and said, "Yeah, that's the way you do it." And we wondered what that meant. But we realized that Duval County was one of the 2 counties in Florida that was refusing to issue any marriage licenses at all, rather than to issue them to same-sex couples in these days before marriage equality became the law of the land under the Obergefell decision that same year. But so I think some people thought that's what we were coming there to do, but we were just coming there to see these files, to see these records. Let's see. Nope. Once we got there, we went down to the bowels of the probate department. We talked to the clerk. The clerk said, "What will?" I said, "You mean you don't have the will?" She said, "Well, I'm sure it's here somewhere." Well, we said, "Well, we planned ahead. It's supposed to be here." And she said, "Well, maybe you can come back tomorrow." We said, "Oh, no, we have driven 5.5 hours. We are not coming back tomorrow. We want to see this will today." Finally, they scrambled around. They found it sitting on a supervisor's desk. And they handed me a little Redwell folder about the size and shape of a lady's clutch purse. And I took the band off of it and I sat down to open it up and see what was inside. It was almost like I got a sense of the smell of the smoke and ash from 1901, the Great Fire of Jacksonville, that this file had somehow managed to survive, to make its way into my hands. And it was almost like when I opened it up, like the papers were glowing, almost as if the words in there or the pages or the lives that were inspiring the words that were on those pages were somehow gleeful, excited that finally their great, 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 great expectations that somebody might finally find this file and touch it and open its contents and be able to understand them and share them with you here today. So I opened the file, and those of you who are on Facebook cannot see, but I am opening the file.
Here it is. John Sutton's will.
And out of that file, I pulled out a stack of documents. And the very first thing I could see was that red wax seal that I had seen in that copy that had come across the internet a year and some months before. It was all fragile and delicate, and I was worried that every time I touched it, that a little piece of it would fall off. And I held that 2-page document in my hand, and there it was.
Just like it was.
And what did I feel? Did I break down? I didn't. And I was asking myself, why am I not emotional? You're an emotional person. What's going on here? And then suddenly it kicked in that I'm holding this will contest file. I'm a trust and estates litigator. There's all this stuff in here that I didn't know was in here, but I should be able to figure out what this is. And I start flipping through the documents, and I'm recognizing documents because some things haven't changed that much in probate over 170 years. And I'm finding the appraisal, and I'm finding the order that's appointing William Adams as the executor. And suddenly I'm focused on trying to do my lawyer thing. And there it was, this beautiful 2-page document handwritten by Gregory Yale, the lawyer. And among the language in the will was Article 3rd that says, I declare myself to be lawfully seized and actually possessed in my own right of the following named mulatto slaves. To wit, Lucy, aged about 45, and her 8 children, Easter, aged about 26, Maria, Joel, Mahala, Sally, all the way down to little David, and then the little baby, Mahala, aged 14 months. If you look close down at the bottom, you can see it's hardly an X. It's more like a cross that John made, and that was signed, witnessed by the lawyer, Gregory Yale, that said this was, in fact, his mark that he made. And Article 4 said, I will and bequeath unto my trustee, friend, and relation, William R. Adams, formerly of Ware County, all of the above named and prescribed property, the slaves, the future increase of the females, the said cattle, hogs, and all to have and hold unto him and his heirs, on the following conditions, namely, that on my death, or as soon thereafter as practicable, he, William Adams, shall remove the slaves and all of their children and permit them to be removed beyond the jurisdiction of the state of Florida and into the states of Ohio, Indiana, or Illinois, or any foreign country or state where they can enjoy their freedom of being released from the condition of slavery. So John found that William Adams would be his trustee, friend, and relation, and that William Adams would own all of these people, but he only owned them on the condition that he would make sure that they got to a free state. Article 5 says, I further will and declare that in case the above conditional bequest, that is the gift to William Adams, is in any way challenged in a court of justice by anybody other than Adams, or if there's somebody who claims a right to the property, or in any other respect says that the will is invalid or against the laws of Florida, and if some judge says or decrees that this isn't a valid will, then the gift to William Adams is no longer conditional. He owns them all right. He can do whatever he wants to do with them, because John knew that he could trust that William Adams would make sure that they would get to freedom. What we learned later on was that Lucy is probably William Adams' half-sister, that they had the same father, Ezekiel Adams. We got to do some DNA testing on that to be sure, because we actually got in touch with some of the Adamses as well as some of Shadrach's relatives. We found the document that was the appointment of the appraisers. This is the document by which the judge made an order that 2 people are supposed to go out and evaluate the value of the estate, including the enslaved people, our ancestors. And here is the appraisal of the property itself. And if you look close, you can see that they say there's 229 head of cattle valued at $4 a head for a $916 total. 2 mares valued at $50. There's 1 horse at $50. There's household furniture and furnishings, $40. A total value of the estate is about $1,106. But there's also an interesting note down at the bottom that says the following slaves were produced by William Adams, the executor of the estate, to Cullen and Mott, who were the guys who were named as the appraisers. And it lists them all by name. And it also says that there are 68 head of cattle that were presented to the appraisers at the cost of $4. But because it was clear to the appraisers that these items were not supposed to be included in the estate, but rather were to be set free, these slaves, these enslaved people were supposed to be free. So he made the note that said, I didn't count them as part of the appraisal of the estate. Oops, let's go back.
So I thought I was just going to find the will, but there's a lot more here than I thought, because this is the whole probate file. So it includes the petition to appoint William Adams as the executor. It includes a bond that he had to post for administering the estate.
For those of you who are on Facebook and can't see the video that I'll have to add, I was opening the file and realizing that I had these pieces of the document, these pieces of the file, the appraisal and the bond that has to be posted by William Adams. Keep going back. Play the darn thing. William Adams as the executor. It includes a bond that he had to post for administering the estate, a bunch of other papers. So I'm kind of taking a quick survey to see what this is. I'm glad I'm a T&E lawyer because it helps me know what these documents are all about. Oh, here's an argument about slaves cannot be manumitted and be free in the state, either directly or indirectly, except upon certain conditions, restrictions, blah, 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 blah. And I, your petitioner, further showeth unto your honor that so much of said instrument as provides that certain personal property shall be appropriated to the use and benefit of such slaves, owing their slavery and otherwise, is contempt to the statute of the state. There's a whole case that deals with, I'm gonna have to spend a lot more time here. Jesus. Until that moment, I didn't know that there had been any litigation going on with the estate. As far as I knew, everything had gone smoothly, that John had done a will that set everybody free, they made their way to freedom, and that was it. But I was a trust and estates litigator, so I knew what this meant. There was an actual document, a will contest. John Sutton's younger brother, Shadrach, had challenged the probate of John's will. So the brother that I had made up and invented and called Eustace, because that seemed like a good old-timey name, was actually named Shadrach. Shadrach Sutton, how old-timey and Old Testament can you get? I was blown away as I sat there in that moment, understanding that these ideas, these visions that had come to me, this message that I had received from my ancestors through my DNA was their way of telling me that this story was here for us to see and to uncover and to unpack. He alleged in his petition that he was informed and believed that John Sutton was very aged and infirm bodily and mentally, and that John had been for years wandering in his intellect and subject to the most childish and extravagant superstitions, that John was kept constantly supplied with and under the influence of ardent spirits, in other words, they were keeping him drunk, that his credulity and imbecility made him an easy dupe to the artifices of designing people, and who represented to him that the families of children heretofore mentioned were his offspring, when in fact, as your petitioner is informed and believes, none of said children were his. So let me break this down for you. What they're trying to say is that John was too old and too crazy and was drunk and he was an imbecile, and these people tricked him and they pretended that they were his children. Now, what's interesting about this particular last allegation was nobody said that they were John's children. The will didn't say it. All the will said was that John owned these people, these slaves. Lucy, her 8 children, her 6 grandchildren. Nobody said they were his children, but everybody knew they were his children. There was no surprise. Shadrach just wanted to get the money himself. And your petitioner further showeth unto your honor that said John Sutton, not being of sound mind and disposing memory, was incompetent to make any disposition of his property by will according to law, and that the instrument in writing that he called his last will is null and void. So they claim that the will wasn't even valid, that it was null and void. And your petitioner further showeth unto your honor that he is advised and believes that slaves cannot be manumitted and set free in this state, either directly or indirectly, except upon certain conditions, restrictions, limitations, for which conditions, restrictions, and limitations, or any of them, said instrument of writing does not in any manner provide. What is this talking about? Let me tell you. It turns out there was a statute in Florida that said you couldn't just go around setting Black people free. You can't set Black people free, because if you set them free, you got to pay a $200 fee for each one of the slaves. And not only do you have to pay a $200 fee, you have to post a bond for their value, lest they become a burden on the people of the state of Florida. So somehow if they cost the state of Florida money, that you need to be able to cover that. So you have to post a bond for their presence in the state. And not only do you have to post a bond, but you have to post the bond for 30 days, which is all the time they can stay in Florida. They got to get out in 30 days anyway. You have to think about what was going on in Florida at that time. Like, Florida had been a Spanish colony originally, and as a Spanish colony, there was much more acceptance of sort of mixed race relationships, and they had whole categories of mulatto, different things, 1/8, 18th, so forth, all these stratifications. But Florida, once it became part of the United States, all the Georgian racists who were coming down there, not that there weren't racists in Florida too, but really just the idea that you're either black or you're white. If you're black, you're presumed to be slave, was what was taking hold and pressing everybody down there. And in Jacksonville, the population was about 50% white and about 50% mostly slaves. There were around the edges some Seminoles, and a lot of the Black people who escaped from slavery came down and merged into the Seminoles, who were welcoming to them. And then there was this little sliver of people, about 10% of the population, who were mixed race, families that were living together in that way. And for the white people, the idea that there would be more Black people coming into the area who might join up with the slaves and throw over our slavery system was not acceptable. So they passed various laws that prohibit you from setting people free. So imagine, as much as we think about slavery and, well, why don't they just set people free if you truly care about somebody? Even if you wanted to set them free, which John apparently did, he couldn't just set them free. He would have had to pay a fine, pay a fee, would have had to post a bond, and they had to leave the state within 30 days. They couldn't even stay in Florida as free people. Now, one of the magical treasures that was in that file was the transcript of the trial. The transcript of the trial. The transcript of the trial was actually the handwritten notes by Judge William F. Crabtree, who was the judge who presided over the trial. I'm not making up the name William F. Crabtree any more than I made up the name Shadrach, but yes, that was his name. Now, the most important piece of evidence at the trial was the testimony of Gregory Yale, who was the lawyer who drafted the will. And Gregory Yale testified, according to the transcript by Judge Crabtree, that I advised him, John, to come to town and get medical advice because John had been sick. He thought he would do so. I told him I thought it'd be better if he could sufficiently recover his health for him to carry his own designs into effect, that is, to set the people free. And he confirmed a desire to do so if he could do so. The morning after the will was about to be executed, I called the witnesses to witness the state of his mind, telling him that as an attorney, I would not draw a will for a man who was not capable of making a will, and it would be their duty to refuse to witness it unless they thought him in his right mind. The deceased, John, said that he was in his right senses. The name of the deceased was written by me, and he made his mark. I charged him $50 for the services. So the testimony of Gregory Yale confirms that he did what he was supposed to do as a lawyer, and that John did what he was supposed to do. He marked it with his X, and then the lawyer did what he was supposed to do, charged him $50 and got the heck out of there. That's about $1,500, according to my friends who calculated that, and that's probably what it would cost to get a high quality, simple trust done today. That's the end of Gregory Yale's testimony, which he actually signed. He was required to sign, attesting to the fact that these were, in fact, his words. Part of his testimony, though, also said that the witness was asked if he should not think Sutton, John, was near 80 years of age. And Gregory Yale said he thought not. He said he did not appear to have any of the indications of extreme old age, no faltering in the voice, no apparent deficit in his truth, and had a remarkably keen eye. No apparent deficit in his hearing. And Lucy said, wait, Lucy? Lucy said she desired to remain here if she could. She expressed a repugnance to going into a cold country where a different mode of living prevails from that of this country, and repugnance to getting into the hands of the next of kin who had frequently threatened to whip them if they ever came into their hands after the death of John Sutton. Lucy said she would just as soon be in the hands of Shadrach or anybody else, except Shadrach had always threatened he would beat them. Now stop for a moment and think about this. We have the words of Lucy, an African woman, African-American woman, an enslaved woman, whose words we are hearing to explain what was going on. She shouldn't have even been able to testify in a court of law against the claims of a white man, but there she was. The words come through the voice of Gregory Yale, the lawyer. And as the court's transcript notes, Lucy's suggestion, however, was not regarded as to the propriety of the provision giving the property to Adam, but she was a very sensible old Negro.
The will. Here's the will contest.
This is just me looking at the will contest and realizing that the family had to get out of town because if not, Shadrach was going to come after them. Now, when you think about it, the family really went on quite a journey because the story is that they left Duval County over here in northern Florida, and they got onto boats. I think the story is that they probably came out of Savannah, the big shipping port, down around the tip of Florida, through the Keys and across the Gulf, over to New Orleans, and then up the Mississippi to southern Illinois, crossing the Ohio River into Polk County, where they settled. That's the story. I'm sticking to it. The final decree was issued on March 10th, 1847. Now, before we see the final decree, let's just go over the facts that we do know. We know that John Sutton was a white farmer in Florida, and we know that he did a will on January 23rd, 1846. And we know as a matter of fact that John owned Lucy and her 8 children and her 6 grandchildren. And one other piece of the transcript that I didn't mention also indicated that when Gregory Yale came out to the house, he said that he met with John's family, not his slaves, but his family, and that they showed him in and that they explained to him that they had lived in Georgia, and the reason why they moved to Florida was because they thought they could be emancipated there, but it wasn't until they got there that they found out that this statute existed that prohibited the emancipation of slaves in Florida. So we know as a matter of fact that John wanted these people to be free. Well, you know, I once heard Maya Angelou say, "You can talk about the facts all day and never get to the truth. Who did she love? What was important to her?" And that's the question that we really need to get to. The facts we can talk about all day, and we can open up and look at this decree and see what the final answer is. But before we do that, I just want to share with you a little bit of the novel that I've been working on, because I'm still working on it and it ain't done yet. But bit by bit, I'm making some progress. And let's see if I can find it here. Stop sharing for a minute. This is the courtroom scene. More irascible than usual due to the rising heat that stifled the Duval County, Florida courtroom, Judge William F. Crabtree wanted to move things along so he could get done and get out of his judicial robe. Bam, bam, bam! He banged the gavel hard. "Who's your next witness, Mr. Bryant?" Bryant, who was short and squat, wheezed and pushed himself up out of his seat to stand at attention at the counsel table. "We are calling the lawyer who drew up the will, Mr. Gregory Yale, Your Honor." Judge Crabtree nodded at Yale, who was sitting on the first row of the gallery behind Bryant at counsel table. "Please take the stand, Mr. Yale." Yale, 50s and trim, stepped sprightly to the witness stand. He took out his spectacles from his waistcoat pocket, and after swearing to tell the truth, Yale was asked by Bryant to explain to the court what happened on the night of January 23rd, 1846. Yale paced himself, describing the scene just as he and Bryant had prepared. Sarah, 17, blushing cheeks and a sweet smile below loose waves of gold-flecked brown hair, referred to as a mulatto by the laws and customs of her time, opened the door to the dark room and somberly ushered in Gregory Yale. She pulled up a chair beside the bed and invited Mr. Yale to take a seat. Close and stuffy, the room was brighter than the hallway had been, but was still dark, illuminated only by a lantern that sat beside the bed. Yale looked at the bed and had trouble seeing if there was anything on it except for piles of quilts and a feather pillow at the top. Nestled into the feather pillow was the head of an old man, a ragged halo of fluffy white hair splayed out from the gray, drawn face with scruffy whiskers and wrinkled skin mottled with brown age spots. The eyes were closed, and Yale wondered if it was too late. He watched the quilt where the heart should have been, but could not detect any movement. "Mr. Sutton?" whispered Yale. "He can't hear too well. You might have to speak up," Sarah said over his shoulder. The lawyer leaned in closer and shook the quilt where the arm should be. He could feel through the covers that flesh had been worn down and that there was little substance between skin and hard bone. He spoke louder. "Mr. Sutton!" There was no answer, so he shouted, "Mr. Sutton!" The old man's chin began to quiver, showing the first signs of life that Yale had observed. The eyelids began to move as well as John Sutton struggled to open them. The papery lids cracked open to reveal bright blue eyes, but rheumy eyes. And John Sutton's dry lips parted slowly and sticky white saliva showed in the corners of his mouth. The old man said something that Yale couldn't quite make out. "What did you say?" Yale asked. "John," Sutton managed to utter. "Hello, John," said Yale as John's eyes closed again. "It don't seem like it, but he can understand you," said Sarah. "Sarah, I need to speak to him alone and to make sure that what I am doing is what he wants and not what anyone else wants." "All right, then, I'll just be out in the hall. You let me know if you need anything. Mama's fixing a plate for you when you finish." And Sarah left the two men alone. Yale pulled the chair even closer to the bed and spoke slowly, but in a loud, clear voice. "Mr. Sutton, John, your boys made an appointment for you to come and see me at my office in town. I am a lawyer. I know you know what that means because I understand you have been a judge in Georgia. Your boys told me that you wanted to do a will that will set free your slave Lucy and her 8 children and her 6 grandchildren that all belong to you. I've written up this paper based on the information they've given me, but I need to know that this is what you really want and not something they are forcing you to do." Yale waited for John to respond. He shook his arm again. "John, can you hear me?" There was no reaction this time, and he shouted, "John Sutton, can you hear me? It is very important that you respond to my questions." Still, there was no reaction. "He can hear you, but he may not be able to understand." Yale was startled by the voice coming from the doorway. He looked over and saw Lucy standing there, holding 2 glasses, each quarter filled with an amber liquid. "I brought him a glass of whiskey. That'll help wake him up. I have a glass for you too." The same cheekbones that made Sarah pretty beneath those loose curls made Lucy seem wise beneath the crown of tight brown coils, carefully brushed up and parted in the center and restrained in a dark kerchief. She walked over and handed a glass to Yale and went to the other side of the bed, pulling up a chair close to John's head. She sat beside him, then lifted his head and brought the glass to his lips. He opened his mouth a little, and Lucy wiped it with a towel before John took another sip, but his eyes remained closed. Yale took a sip of his own whiskey and felt it burn as it went down his throat. I have to tell you that if I can't talk to him alone and be confident that he wants me to do what I was called here to help him to do, then I won't be able to write this will. I understand, Mr. Yale, Lucy said. She had the whiskey glass in her hand. I'll leave you alone with him, but may I tell you something before I go? Yes. I object, shouted Shadrach Sutton's lawyer, Joe Lancaster, leaping to his feet, to this hearsay testimony from a negress who is incompetent to testify against the claims of a white man in this court. Lancaster pointed his finger at Yale in the witness stand, ignoring the presence of Lucy herself, sitting on the second row of the gallery, chained at the wrist to her daughter, Sarah, both under the watchful eye of Sheriff Ludwig. The inner dignity and beauty of the two women was undimmed by their suffering of the last 2 months, suffering that had nonetheless registered in their unkempt hair, the weariness in their eyes, the smell that emanated from them, and the soiled and torn blue taffeta dress that Sarah wore. Do you see any jury here? Judge Crabtree asked. Indeed, there was no jury in the box. Beside Lancaster sat Shadrach Sutton, slight, wiry, a smug grin on his face, and behind him the gallery of the courtroom was packed with white residents of Jacksonville. This is a court trial, Mr. Lancaster, Judge Crabtree said. I'll hear what Mr. Yale has to say and decide what to let into evidence. Yale looked at Bryant. He raised his eyebrows, asking if he should go on. Continue, Mr. Yale, Bryant said. Lucy inhaled deeply before she spoke to Yale in the darkened bedroom. I was not a child when I came to live with John Sutton. Close to 18 years old at that time. My master was Ezekiel Adams. Master Adams was also my daddy. I suspect, like any woman, my comings and goings were always controlled by a man. But it's a special thing to know that the man who controls you can sell you or give you away, no different than a pot or a pan or a chicken or a sow. Lucy bent to check the chamber pot beside John's bed, and finding it empty, shook her head and put it back on the floor. But Master Adams was a good man, more kind than cruel to all his slaves, and I just feel like he had special attention for me, for I was his blood. First time I saw John Sutton, I was about 12 or so, Lucy continued. Him, his brothers, and Master Adams were part of a group of men who were fighting the Seminoles and running them off the land so the white folks could farm and raise cattle in Irwin County, same as they did in Carolina before they moved down to Georgia. And John Sutton had come out to Adams' plantation to meet with the other members of the militia to make plans for a raid. I was helping to serve food to the men, and I seen how John Sutton looked at me, and it scared me. And I could tell that Master Adams seen how John Sutton looked at me too. And Master Adams was scared for me too. And from that point on, Master Adams made sure that John Sutton wasn't never near me alone. But when Master Adams died, I was supposed to belong to his son, William. But William wasn't but 17 years old, a year too young to own property in his own name. And by that time, John Sutton was the probate judge. And one of the first things he did was to become guardian over Master Adams' son and William. And that meant that anything that William owned, John owned, and that included me. It's a strange thing to be owned by your own daddy. It's even stranger to be owned by your own younger half-brother who himself ain't got no control over you. So I was about 18 when I went to live with John Sutton. Folks thought it was strange that John had never married a white woman. His family could not understand it. She chuckled. It was one thing to keep a Negro woman making babies, but it was another thing entirely to treat her with kindness, or as if she was anything more than livestock. Lucy sighed. John Sutton was kind to me. He only beat me once, and then only to prove to his daddy that I was his property and that he was not treating me like a proper wife. And it ain't right for a man to cry, but he did after that beating. And he made me a promise that he would never beat me again. Lucy dipped the edge of a tea towel into a bowl of water that sat on the table beside the bed. She wrung out the excess liquid and gently wiped John's forehead. We moved farther away from his family and all the pointing fingers and wagging tongues by folks who said there was something wrong about the way that we lived. And in the end, his father cut him off. and all the land that belonged to the Suttons went to John's 4 brothers, Absalom, Moses, David, and Shadrach. But John didn't mind. He was happy. We were. Then along came Easter. And I swear that when John saw that baby's eyes, he fell in love all over again. And then came Maria and Joel and Mahala and Sarah, and Jack and Benjamin and David. As Lucy spoke, she rose from the seat she'd taken on her chair, and Gail watched as she lifted the blankets at the foot of the bed. She vigorously massaged the pasty skin of John's legs and briskly rubbed each of his feet in turn, and they reddened as the blood began to circulate. We lived a quiet, peaceful life, she went on, and nobody bothered us or messed with us or even cared much about us. We didn't ask for nothing from the Suttons, and they did not think there was anything that we could do for them, so they let us be. Lucy pulled the covers back over John's feet and tucked the blankets under the thin mattress. But when John's daddy died, we went to pay our respects. We didn't want nothing or need nothing. We just went to pay our respects. But while we were there, I saw how John's brother Shadrach looked at my daughter Sarah, and there was something evil there. Something evil and nasty. And I told John, and John seen it too. And John made me another promise that he would protect Sarah and all of us. And that was 2 years ago. And we packed everything we had, everything. You should have seen us, all our clothes and our household things and chickens and 400 cows. We packed it all up and left Georgia and come down here to Duval County. John had heard that Florida was a place where he could set us free. It wasn't until we got here that we learned different. We found out that it ain't legal to set Negroes free in the state of Florida, and then we didn't know what to do. Lucy begged Yale's pardon as she walked past him to the other side of the bed. She plucked the covers loose and bent down, leaning, sniffing, hoping that 3 days of constipation had come to an end, and smelling nothing sharp, she took John's right hand. She pulled a small bottle of liniment from her pocket and poured that liniment into her palm, and the minty smell wafted in the air as she rubbed her fingers together before smoothing the ointment on John's dry arm and down to his fingertips. John promised me he would see a lawyer and find a way to keep his promises to me and Sarah and to all of us. And I know he meant to keep his promise. But then he got sick, and every time we tried to make an appointment to come in town to see you, he was too sick to make the trip. And we had a doctor come out, and he said there's nothing much we can do. Lucy walked past Yale, excusing herself again, and went to the other side of the bed and rubbed liniment on John's left arm and hand before tucking it back under the covers, as she had done with the right. You've been in this bed for the last 2 weeks, and that's why Joel and Jack come out to fetch you and bring you out to the house. Lucy crossed her arms and stood over John. And for the first time, she looked directly into Yale's eyes. She spoke slowly and clearly. John Sutton is a good man. And I don't know what the law says about a promise that a white man makes to a slave, but I know that John made promises to me in his life. He promised to take care of me and our children, and to protect me and our children and our children's children too. And he told me that these promises that he made in his life, he would keep in his death. Yale had sat quietly, holding his whiskey in his hand as he listened to Lucy tell her story. The room had remained still, save for Lucy's ministrations captured in the shadows flickering in the light of the lantern. So Yale sensed, before he saw, a movement on the bed, the old man's hand struggling to emerge from the layers of quilts and squeeze Lucy's hand. Fanning himself and loosening the closure on his robe, Judge Crabtree asked, "Anything else?" "Miss Lucy is a wise old Negro." "Objection, Your Honor," snapped Lancaster. "I move to strike that opinion testimony." Wearily, Judge Crabtree intoned, "That comment is stricken. Anything else, Mr. Yale?" It was late, so I stayed with the family overnight. The next morning, John was feeling better, and I went over the will with him twice. And when I was done, he marked it with his X, and I was a witness to that mark. So maybe that's what happened. Maybe that's what could have happened in that testimony from the trial. But what really did happen? What was the result of that will contest? Well, the final decree, as I said, came down on March 10th, 1847. And as I said, we've talked about what the facts say. And now let's find out what the document said. Well, as it turned out, Judge Crabtree's final decree upheld the will, finding that it was valid, and he ordered Shadrach to pay $28.08 in court costs. William F. Crabtree, Judge of Probate, County of Duval, March 10th, 1847. Will is valid. And here's that copy that's in Polk County, Illinois, or at least a copy of it. And as it recites, it was recorded there so that these people could enjoy their full and perfect freedom, free from the control of all and every person, on December 28th, 1846. They were actually in Illinois before the trial even took place. I don't know what would have happened if Judge Crabtree had come down with a different result. There's Sarah, born in 1829 in Duval County, Florida, in slavery. She was 17 in 1846 when the will was done, and she died in 1910 in Polk County, Illinois, in freedom. And here's another of those images from Sarah, my great, 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 great grandmother. Anybody who's from Mahala's line, I know some of you Hills are from the Mahala line. Here's that picture of, it's probably kind of glary, I gotta turn it the right way, of Sarah, my great, 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 great grandmother. And here's her son, George Sumner. We keep the ancestors close by. Who are the legacy of John and Lucy? We are. We live today because they lived before us. Now, I like to say that uncovering and unpacking these stories has helped me figure out some things. Like, I used to think that history was what happened to famous people, to kings and queens or princes and popes, or to ordinary people who did something special, like Harriet Tubman, or Martin Luther King, or Frederick Douglass, or Bryan Stevenson at the Equal Justice Initiative, or the Obamas. My high school friend, Michelle, and I were in French class together for 3 years, and then 2 years together at law school with Barack 2 years behind us. And I used to think that history was what happened to those special people. But this unpacking and this digging out and this finding the lives of our ancestors, their lived experiences, has helped me to understand that we are living history every day. And while history shapes us and changes us, we have the ability, the power to shape and change history ourselves. And just as I have these ancestors who back 7+ generations, and John and Lucy 4 generations back, who did something, who took a step, who did something to make our lives better by doing that will to set us free. We have these descendants at the other end of this arc of history who are looking back at me, who will be wondering, what did I do to try to change the world, to make it better, to bend the arc of history towards justice, holding me to account. And the question for all of us, I think, is what are we doing? What can we do to change the world, to make it better, to bend that arc of history towards justice? I want to thank you for helping me fulfill my mission, which is to bend that arc of history towards justice. And I would love to take questions from y'all if you'd like to ask any questions. There's some other stuff I could show you. There's some other documents, there's some coincidences and things that I've discovered through the process of this. Let me see if I can unmute, if I can figure out how to do that. Not the best tech guru. Share screen, no. Participants, no. Security, let's try that. Unmute themselves. You can unmute yourselves now, I think. So y'all can unmute yourselves, or you can, hey, I hear the voice. Or you can send messages through the chat.
I have a quick question. So was John really a judge?
Well, there's evidence that John was in fact at some point a probate judge in Ware County. Didn't necessarily have to be a lawyer back then to be a judge, but he was, somebody had to do the work of judges in these smaller counties. And apparently he was some kind of a judge and actually was the guardian for William Adams. For William Adams. I think they were actually younger. I think they were probably 14, 15 when Ezekiel died. And John, as a result, owned Lucy from that point on.
I'm just wondering if you were able to send those documents to, I guess, to various ones that need to have a copy of the ones that you found records from.
Was I able to?
Well, if I send you my email address, maybe you can.
And a lot of it, I posted all over the Last Will of Lucy Sutton page. But yeah, copies of the documents I'm able to share. That's another piece of the story that I can tell you, which is that after Jeffrey and I drove the 5.5 hours back to Marco Island where the conference was, we started talking to these other lawyers, and we were just walking around a day, like, oh my God, I can't believe we drove 5.5 hours, and we were using GPS and we're finding places with names like Cracker Crossing, turn right at Cracker Crossing. So we made a photocopy of that. But we get back down to Florida, we tell our friends who were lawyers there, mostly white folks and lawyers who were in Florida. And I said, oh my God, we found these documents, these original documents from Duval County that were our family's freedom papers. And they said, well, you got to get those records. I said, what do you mean we got to get those records? They said, well, there's a statutes in Florida, that says that they can destroy records once they've been digitized. And once these records get digitized, they can be destroyed. And I'm like, well, how are we supposed to get those records? And they said, we'll do it. And these friends of mine, these lawyers that I know, went to court for me, pro bono, no charge. They went to the courthouse. They filed a petition with the judge in Duval County. And as it turns out, the judge who made the order was a descendant of Isaiah Hart, who was one of the founding fathers of the city of Jacksonville. And this Isaiah Hart was an interesting character himself, because not only did he first set up the first trading post in Jacksonville and help found the city, he had a white wife and children, but he also had a relationship with a slave named Amy, who he set free and left her the bulk of his estate after he died. And the little funny story that this judge told was that apparently there was a clerk of the court who loaded a bunch of documents onto a boat, took them into the St. Johns River, and managed to save them from the raging fire of the Great Fire of Jacksonville. And I have to believe that it was destiny and fortune and the universe and God that said that this file was one of those files that got saved because you guys needed to hear this story today. So I have the original documents, these 43 pages, 40 something pages that constitute the entire will contest file, brittle pages. They're in protected document covers right now. My goal ultimately is to hopefully be able to donate them to something like the to the African American History Museum in DC, and with a big showy production number at some point. But I have the photocopies, so you guys can see the photocopies of the images, and maybe we'll end up having a reunion someday at the National African American Museum of History, where we can all come together and donate these records there and make a big deal about that. That would be something to look forward to in a post-COVID world.
Well, it's a nicely presentation, and I will appreciate it. Very good. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rudy. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here, all of you all.
Terry, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
This is Gawain Perkins. Yeah, my question basically is, and I'm sure Dennis probably, my cousin Dennis probably has some of this information, but once they settled in Polk County in Illinois, so what happened after that? Do you have any information about what happened to Lucy, or, how our family traces from that point?
So from on our line, we have Lucy was married William Sumner, and I always get this wrong, and Dennis is going to correct me. And they had George Sumner. George Sumner, his child was a Krim. Florence Krim, and Florence married Alonzo Krim, and Alonzo and Florence had you got to know Leora and Viola.
Okay.
And
okay.
Louis. George.
Okay.
Mom's got those. So that's,
and Julius.
Alana knows them too. The other thing that was part of that same set of reunion materials from 2001 that probably Georgia or Alana might have included in there too was an article from, I think, 1917 or something, that there was this thresher accident. The thresher, separates wheat from chaff, and somebody had come to town in Polk County and had sold to one of our ancestors this threshing machine, and the guy was supposed to set it up, and he didn't set it up right, and then somehow it exploded, and I think like 3 or 4 people were killed, and there's a graphic, gory description of how a hole the size of a I didn't say golf ball, I forgot what it was, went into some kid's head and killed him instantly. And so we have these little bits and pieces of our history that happened later on that that will be fun to.
Yeah, that was actually 1879.
1879.
Yeah.
Dennis always knows all these facts.
Question.
Yes, Dawn.
You said something about once they were in Florida, they went up to Savannah and then went around I forget that part, the land parts of Florida to go up to the Mississippi to travel up. So what information, or how do you know that? Because I was, for some reason, I was thinking in my head that they would go just travel back up through Georgia and then travel that way.
And that makes sense too. And I don't know if I have any evidence yet of which way they really did go. The story that I've heard is that they took these boats and went that way. And there's a logic to that, in that they might have thought that they would have avoided some of the trouble that you would have had on land, going directly across through Georgia and probably across through Alabama, and so patrollers at each step of the way, even though they had the Freedom Papers, you can't totally count on that to get you by. So I think they probably, at least as we were writing it in the narrative version of it, we imagined that they sort of thought about which way would be the best way to go, and in the end concluded that it would be safer to go ahead and take the water route and go up the around to the tip. And
So I can remember hearing something about like the family following up through the Trail of Tears, like when the Indians travel, which makes sense, like because it goes through Rome, Georgia, which is the northern part of Georgia, and I know that they traveled up that way, or the Indians traveled up that way. So I was just thinking, for some reason, at least I've heard that. I don't know if there's truth to that either.
Don
Yeah.
and Terry, this is Tanya.
Yeah, Tanya.
Hi, Tanya.
That's what my father told me personally, and he told our family that that's the way they came. That's what was told by his father, David.
Oh, okay. Through the Trail of Tears?
No, up through the Mississippi, because they
Oh, I
got off
see.
in North Carolina, Georgia, and Illinois. That's the way they came up.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
you know, a lot of it's family story. Maybe one day we'll actually find, you know, I'm always trying to find, I've tried to find shipping records, because usually they're shipping records and manifests that show all the people who were passengers. And sometimes you can find these things, and amazingly, I can sit on my couch and read the newspaper from the Jacksonville Times of 1846 without getting off my butt, which is a nice thing about being able to do research in this era. That's always the story I heard, was that this trip around, you know, with boats through up the Mississippi. But I could also believe that there also could be family stories about them coming through through the Trail of Tears and then up, each possible. One other thing I was going
Terry, hi.
Yeah.
Oh, Terry, hi. This is Carmen in Arizona. Had a quick question. Two questions, really. You had mentioned earlier about the name of the reunion, possibly, adding the Suttons to the other groups, the Sumners, the Alsips, because we grew up learning those names and not really, I knew they were all connected because our Uncle John Quincy Sutton, who lived in Michigan, favored one of the Alsips that we knew growing up, and you could just see the favor, but not now that you put the story together, it all makes sense, and they all kind of favored when you look at it when they come together in a reunion. And secondly, I was going to ask, how soon do you think your book will be finished, and when will we all know? And hopefully you got some people in mind that might be able to play those roles if it should come to TV.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carmen, for trying to get the names as wide as we can. And I've also been reached out to by some of I connected through Ancestry with some of the white people, like Shadrach's relatives, and talked to them a little bit. I would love to have a deeper conversation with them about, why are you trying to keep us enslaved? What's wrong with you? Yeah, as far as the actual products and things that are coming out, I'll tell you that there's a bunch of different projects. Still working on the novel. I've written a memoir, which is complete. I've sent it to a couple of agents. Nobody's really picked up on it yet. We'll see what happens with that. With my husband and our co-writer, John Meeks, we're working on a limited series for television that's going to have 10 episodes, and we've written about 4 of them now, and including the pilot. And so we have some tentacles out to try to push that forward. We're not sure exactly where that's going to go. We also have a plan for a documentary series, which sort of follows the family's path, you know, maybe when we're out of COVID, from Jacksonville through Jacksonville up to Savannah, then through the Gulf, and then up the Mississippi, where we'll sort of track and retell their stories. And the other thing that we've sort of woven into the narrative are stories of some other true people who really did exist, who were contemporaries of Lucy's and our families. For example, there was a woman named Anna Majigini Jai Kingsley, and she was one of the wealthiest women in Florida at the time when Lucy was there. And her story is a fascinating story. She was a slave. She was captured from Africa, and at the age of 12, she was taken to Cuba, and the slave owner, who was also a trader named Zephaniah Kingsley, bought her, but he married her in some kind of a ceremony in Cuba. Yes, she was 12 years old, but she was supposedly an African princess in two different lines, the Majigini line and the Injaye line. And he married her in some kind of a ceremony in Cuba, but he treated her with respect, and he put her in charge of his of some of his plantations. And the two of them actually had to fight against the Georgia rebels who were coming down into Florida when they first moved there. And there were three women who were all like wives to him, which was not unusual for Anna, who had come from an African country where they had plural marriages. And they spent these years together. They had 4 children together. The 2 daughters that they had, they married off to white men and they stayed in Florida. The 2 sons that they had, they moved them to Haiti. And so they were staying there because it was safer there because there was so much racism in the United States. And after Zephaniah died, he left a will that was to provide property and to Anna. She was already free. He had set them free, so they were free people, and they were the wealthiest. They're one of the wealthiest families in Florida. And as it turns out, after he died, the somebody, his sister, tried to sue to keep Anna from inheriting family property. So this white family tried to keep Anna from getting the money that she was entitled to. Her son came back to the United States to fight against that. He was killed at sea. And then Anna had to come back and fight the will contest herself. And she had to trace back her claim to receive the property back to the 1700s when Florida first became a part of the. I guess somebody should mute. Maybe I can mute them. Let's see. Somebody had Anna had to come back and fight in court for her right to inherit her husband's estate, and she had to trace back her claim to the time when they came over as Spanish citizens. And because they were Spanish citizens with all the rights of Spanish citizens, just because she was Black, she couldn't be denied her right to the property. And as it turns out, Judge Crabtree, who was the same judge in our case, was the same judge who ruled in her case the year before. And so we've written into our story an opportunity for Lucy to believe that maybe Anna is her aunt and she's trying to find her long lost mother. And so we weave that together, and that's part of our story. The other thing that we're working on is a curriculum for schools. And the idea is to create a curriculum that is based on like a law school level. So students who are in law school can learn about wills and trusts and property and ownership, and about these human aspects. What does it mean to own property? What is property? And then we want to scale that curriculum so that we have a version of it that's available for college level, junior college, high school, and middle school level, so kids can grow up learning about history and humanities through this. And right now we're working with a couple of professors at the University of Washington Law School who are trying out the curriculum. We're going to keep shaping and adapting it. And I've got a meeting coming up with the University of California at Irvine. And their humanities department is also interested in perhaps working with using their resources as a platform to develop this curriculum and move that out into the world. So I guess be on the lookout. I'll reach out and share with people as things get developed and created. We've done some videos and things like that that try to tell the story as well. And I've had the good fortune, I like to say, it's been great because I've been invited to share the story. And as I said, my mission is to share the story. Every time I share it, I feel like I'm fulfilling my mission. And I like to say I've been given the opportunity to share the story from New York to New Mexico, from Madison to Monterey, from the eastern shore of Maryland to the north shore of Waikiki and back to Florida where it all began. And in the process of doing this, I've discovered that we can shape history. We can bend the arc of history towards justice. Let's see. Any other questions? Oh, stamp from the beginning. I love that. Paul mentioned stamp from the beginning. That's awesome.
Hey, Terry.
Yeah.
Where did you get the picture of Lucy from?
Actually, this is Sarah, who's Lucy's daughter. And where did it come from? This was a copy of and I don't know if any of Florence Claire's family is here, but they had this portrait, which I think, I'm not sure where it had been found originally, but it's about yay big. And according to a photographer, somebody who restored it, um, it was a pretty expensive thing to have had even when they had it. So the original is held by cousin in Florida. Mom, you're going to tell me what her name is, and I can't think of it right now. But she has the original. So I have a photocopy of that and a photocopy of this other one. And so she's collected those. And
Okay.
together. Any other?
Okay,
So
Terry.
my question is, where
Yes.
did John Sutton originate previous to Florida and Georgia? And were they in Europe? If so, which country? Were they in colonial America, like Virginia?
So yeah, the tracing back that I've been able to do with John Sutton's family, I think, and I haven't tested it out, but it sort of matches up with the DNA testing that I've done. I think we're like, at least I'm like 73 or something like that percent African American and like 20 something white. A tiny bit of Indian, not very much Native American at all. But the story, I believe, is that John's family, before they came to North Carolina, had been in the Boston or in the New England area. We went to try to find the gravestones of, I'm trying to think of the name of the family, but we've been able to go back, I think, to 1400s in England on John's relatives on that side. And of course, we haven't been able to get back any further on Lucy's side. And that's the grand mystery that I would love to someday be able to dig in and figure out, where did Lucy really come from? That's one of my big dreams.
Yeah.
But yeah, we go back to England mostly.
Terry, again, what was Lucy's father's name again? The man that
Lucy's father's name was Ezekiel Adams.
Ezekiel Adams. Okay.
And there's other funny little things that confirmed for me that Lucy was likely William Adams' sister. William Adams was married to a woman named Sarah. So interesting, Sarah's a popular name, but interesting that their niece is also named Sarah. William Adams and his wife Sarah also had a son named John. They also had a child named Lucinda. So, these were families that I think were, I think the Suttons and the Adamses went way back, and they had a warmth and an affection for one another. And even though Black people and white people weren't supposed to be living together and married, I could be wrong, but I think that they tried to carve out a relationship as best they could under these crazy circumstances. And as I said, he owned her. There's no consent by law. We understand that to be true, but I think human beings try to make the most of circumstances. They do the best they can with what they got. And I think Lucy played her cards as well as she could. I bet she was needling him all the time. John, when are you gonna get that will done? John, you need to set us free. John, move to Florida, because I heard from a friend that we can go down there and get free. And so he moves to Florida, and they get there and they're like, oh no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. John, get that will done. Get that will done. And thank goodness that he did, because he did it in January. He was dead by May. The will was probated in May. The family set off. They recorded their other copy in Ware County, I think in September of 1846, and made their way up. And then by December 28th, 1846, they got to have their first, a little bit after their first Christmas there in Illinois. And in fact, Easter, Lucy's eldest daughter, had her final child, a seventh child named John, not long after they arrived in Illinois, who was born around that time. All these little connections. The other thing is the red wax seal on the envelope. This is like a real personal me story, but when I was a little kid, I took calligraphy classes, and for some reason I was kind of into this stuff. And one day I'm with my dad, who's somewhere on this call, and we were at Cox and Brentano's, and they had a wax sealing set that you can, seal up envelopes. I was like, oh, I want one of those, Dad. He's like, why do you want that? You don't need that. I was like, please, Dad. So he gives me this, I wanted a red one. They didn't have red. And so I would seal cards and gifts and things like that with this. Why? I think the ancestors were calling out to me, putting the seed in my head. I think cousin Georgia helped do that too by, inspiring us with these little bits and pieces, these little seeds on the path that allow us to find our way to where we are. And, it's this magical opportunity that we have, like so few other people have, to really access directly our history and to understand it and to learn from it. I know it's getting late. I don't want to keep you all up, but I'm happy to answer questions. And there's lucysutton.com. There's a web page that I have, and I try to post stuff on the blog page of anything that's new. And there's like Twitter and places like that, and then the Facebook page on the last little Lucy Sutton. When I go around and give conferences or talk with people and gather information, I try to go on Facebook and post a little image there and tell a little bit about the story. But there's so many people, all of you guys have been so helpful too. Like Dennis Davis has been amazing in providing information, and like I said, Alana and your mom has been helpful with information, and who else is out there? I know Tony Ateki, I saw him somewhere, and he came and met me, and we were having a conference somewhere. It's just been a family, and I really appreciate all the work that everybody's been doing to try to move all this forward. So unless,
Terry,
yes,
this
yeah.
is Deborah. I just wanted to, I found out some things when I moved here to I had got a few phone calls from white so-called relatives. There was some guy that was in West Tennessee trying to research us. But I think he found out that we weren't related. But as my time here in Dixon, I came across a court magistrate that owned a country club here, and his last name, really shocked to see the name Sutton here. And come to find out, when I met him in person, he was the spitting image of a Sutton. He had the same body frame as my dad. He looked like my dad. If they had been put right next to each other, he could have, there would have been it would have been unfounded. It was ridiculous. And I even confronted him about it. In the beginning, he came to me, and I asked him about, where are you from? Are you from here originally, and all these things? And I said, you got to be a cousin. And he tried to refute that. He wanted to deny it, with him being white and a court magistrate. He did not want to. And then he started going off his family tree, and I trying to tell me that, where your grandfather had or David. I said, well, I've got a John and a David as a grandfather. I started he got speechless after I started saying all this stuff to him. Every time he would throw something at me, I said, well, yeah, I'm related to them, and the next thing I know, there's no way around it. I think you're a relative. I said, you look exactly like my dad and his brothers.
I love it.
So I know here, and plus he started telling me their trail of travel, which was coming up through Mississippi, he said that they went through Tennessee and Arkansas and up through Illinois. So that told me another thing. I said, yeah, I think you're a relative. I said, and you look just like my father.
Well, you know,
Well, the other,
But
what, I hate to interrupt you, Deb, but you know, there is a lot of family members we don't know where they went to.
right.
So we have this big group that's here now. But there are a lot of ones that, you know, we find them in Illinois, but after that, we don't know what happened to them. So and I'm quite sure they could have passed and they could have went the white way. So, you know,
You
that's
had
where some
seen
of
this man's
that's where
hair.
some of the,
It was straight wire, straight up.
Yeah.
Dad used to wear his hair like that sometimes. I remember when I was a little girl.
No,
How, you know, it was the military cut.
I know Edward
Okay.
Davis has done a lot of research too, and like he's found, you know, in the Newbern line, because Easter was a Newbern, so all of her children are Newberns, and I think you have Jewish people who were Newberns. Was it Stroza? Dennis probably knows this story.
Yeah, I mean, all the Perkins except for like Gawain and, you know, that group of Perkins, they are not, but the ones that are in Carbondale are from Easter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they're all descendants. You know, they're all Newbern descendants. It's also we also have the other Newbern descendants also. So it's some of us are kind of related 3, 4, 5 times. It's crazy, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I was just wanting to just pass that on. As I just thought that was really just interesting to see, to show that how scattered we are all over the place unknowingly.
Yeah,
and there's a whole Sumner family who left Kentucky to come to Illinois, and you know, when we got connected at that way, and I think Dennis will tell you too, that happens on a couple of different cousins and kissing cousins, and lots of that has gone on in our family. So a lot of us do look a lot alike for more reasons than one.
But then can I ask you a question now? Okay, John, what was his father's name?
John's father's name was David also.
I couldn't remember.
His father's name was David Sutton.
Oh.
David Sutton, yeah.
So it could have been one of Shadrach's kids that ran that. I mean, that could be through here too then. I mean, that in my area.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I don't
so
know
I mean,
if Shadrach had any kids outside of his white wife Susanna. He may have, and that may be a whole other story too. But I know that there also would be some people who might have been further down, who once they got further north were kind of like, well, we don't have to be black if we don't want to be.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, it's just amazing how interesting our family tree is and how you've made it blossom into this big, wide. I feel like I'm on that show on PBS where what's his name does everybody's DNA.
Right. Finding your
really
roots.
interesting, and I thank you for that.
Finding your roots. So, well, like I said, it's really my honor, and I feel like it's my mission, and I'm so glad that when I suggested doing this, everybody said came out. So thank you so much. I'll have to check and see whether I left the Facebook people abandoned because I don't have any backup. Yes, you have one more, Carmen?
One more question. Can you give us your email address?
Yeah.
And any, okay, go ahead.
My email address is Terry, Terry, F like Franklin. The number 40, at gmail.com.
Okay.
In the chat, which
Terry F.
Terry 40 at gmail.com.
Okay. Okay.
And I think if it's recorded, then I'll be able to share the whole video with everybody, including the chat. There's some chat stuff here that either good questions or things like that.
Okay. Well, this is very interesting.
Well, thank you for spending the time on Black History Friday. And I love all y'all, and I'm looking forward to sometime when we can all get together physically again. And thanks, Dennis, for keeping things going. And like I said, everybody's been so helpful. Edward has come out and seen me give a talk in Oakland, and he came down to LA and saw the original documents himself. So this is all of our legacy. So I'm happy to be able to share it with y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Terry.
Happy
Yes.
holidays, Merry Christmas.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can I
All that good stuff.
Go ahead, Dawn.
I'm sorry, this is about our health. I hope you guys are wearing masks in your respective areas. It's very important that you wear the mask over your nose, not under here, but it goes over your nose and in your mouth. Okay, make sure you wash your hands with soap and water if you can. If you're out and about and you can't, use hand sanitizer to work. And social distance is very important. The nurses are getting tired, y'all. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything? I just did this, so anybody's got anything to say?
Okay.
You're welcome to say.
I wanted to say something because my grandfather is Jess Perkins, and my grandmother is how we come through the connection through Louise, but her married name is Perkins. So I'm listening to Dennis say that the Perkins portion of our family is not related in that way, but I'm just, like you were saying about the kissing cousins and the whole thing, I'm just wondering if there really is a connection between if they were.
I think there's Perkins on both sides from Aunt Louise. I'm sure.
Yeah, you have to look to see where your grandfather came from. I thought I saw something where he came from the South somewhere.
Yeah, because there's a lot
Gawain, do you know?
in East St. Louis, Missouri, or no, not Missouri, but East St. Louis, Illinois, right?
From I think he was born actually in Mississippi, I think, at some point.
Exactly. That's what I saw, Mississippi. And then they relocated to East St. Louis.
Right.
But it doesn't mean anything. You can't take anything away because you never know what's what. And we don't know what our ancestors did. And that's on them. But you got to do your DNA to find out, how you're connected. We can't make no assumptions,
Because it seems real close.
I think Ancestry.com has the thing on sale. $49 or something I saw.
There's a holiday gift. The other holiday gift you might think about is they also have an Equal Justice Initiative calendar.
Whatever. I'll just email.
Well, I did my DNA.
What did you say about the Equal Justice?
I was saying that every year they come out with a calendar of racial injustice. And so, for every day, you can read a story about some way that we have been treated poorly in this country. And I think, instead of letting it bring you down, I think it can inspire you to say, this is what this country has been, but it's up to us to make it what we dream of, to force this country to live up to the ideals that are inscribed into its founding documents, that all people are created equal, that that God has given us a right to be here and to exist. And so when we see these examples of how we've been treated, it can inspire us to keep pushing and to keep fighting and to never give up that struggle to try to achieve what this country is supposed to give us, what we're entitled to. So maybe that's
how do we get a hold of that, Terry? How do we get a hold of that?
Of that future or of
from the Equal Justice Initiative.
Oh yeah. Let's see. I think you can go EJI. Let's see. Probably find it.
Oh yeah, Beverly, I've been down there to visit. It is fantastic.
I have the book, so
just Google it. Google EJI or.
Well, yeah, because I have the book, so it's probably in there. I can look in there.
I sent you a private message, Beverly.
Oh, okay. Let me
write down in here on this piece of paper and then wrap and paste. That's fine.
Okay. I have the link here. I'm going to put it in the chat as well.
Yeah.
And I think we need to get together soon again too. So I think we all need to get together and have something, a different format or something.
Yeah.
That sounds good, Dennis.
Yeah, we just, we can get around and start talking about our family. And just like I know Dawn sent me a little message the other day, and she didn't know that my grandfather and my Aunt Ida were siblings. And I said, oh boy, so we got something to do. I'm going to, Doreen, if you hear that, you got to spank your daughter. She don't know her family members, so.
I didn't know the connection. I didn't, because I remember going to Aunt Ida's house when I was little, and she had the White House on the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Uncle Han, and I remember the Uncle Bus, right?
Yeah.
He was the one with the larynx, the artificial larynx.
Yes.
Because I was scared of him. I was scared of him as a kid, but I didn't know the connection.
So Dennis, can you put that together? Our next.
Yeah, I think we need to do something. Maybe something before Christmas, and we'll do it a little earlier in the day because the folks on the East Coast it's late, so it's 11 something. So we can do something maybe a little earlier. We look at some. We'll see what we can do. We got to do something before Christmas so we can start talking, because like I said, we're trying to connect all these families together, and a lot of people don't know how we're connected, and we just got to go through it. I mean, there are some people that don't want to have this so large, but I think it's unfair to someone that doesn't know about how they're connected, because I know that, go ahead.
Can you put your email in the chat, and maybe we could send you our emails? And that way we can send you our emails and you can contact us that way.
Okay. We can work on that. And
I mean, I don't know if you want to do that or not. I'm kind of putting it out there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we just got to find a way to. Is that the best way to connect with you?
Pardon me?
Is that the best way to connect with you, Terry? Dwayne?
Either that or by text, but I was just
okay.
If we're going to do a Zoom, it's kind of easy to do it through email.
Okay. Yeah. True that. True. Ooh. Okay. Let me think about something. And let me see. Get that in there right quick.
Just real quick, I was just talking to Karen, and she said that her brother is Glenn Perkins. My uncle is Glenn Perkins.
Yeah, my dad was Glenn Edward Perkins Sr. and my brother is Glenn Edward Perkins Jr. And we're
He's Byron Glenn, but it's just like you're saying how the names just go across.
Oh wow, John Quincy Sutton. There's about 6 of him. 6. I don't know how many it is. There's a John Quincy that's just an infant right now. I think that's Renee's, which Renee's name is Sarah. That's another Sarah. Her grandchild is named John Quincy. Not Sutton, but still John Quincy. So, I mean, those names are just going on like Sarah and John, and the names are used so many times.
Georges, lots of Georges.
Yeah.
There was a young man in here, and he was talking about his father was Bill Perkins. Did we ever get that all sorted out? Because I know I had said something because my uncle is also William Bill Perkins, and he's in New York. So I was just wondering about that.
Hey, there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot we need to talk about and everything. As you see, Cecil Purnell Jr. on here. He worked with my brother for years. One of my brother's best friends, but they didn't know they were related. So that's another thing that's just kind of heartbreaking to find out later on. that wow, they were close.
All right, everybody. I'm gonna go and let everybody go.
Yeah.
I think when I leave, it's gonna close everybody out. So,
All right.
thank you all for being here. It means so much.
Thanks, Terry.
Showed up.
All
Thanks
right,
a lot,
thank
Terry.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it, Terry.
Love y'all.
Love you
All
guys.
right, love you too.
Thank you.
Good night, family. Happy